Welcome in day one of the NBA playoffs. No more play-in garbage nonsense. We're here. It's official. Day one. We've got 4 big games to get to on this Live Before Lock, this noon Eastern edition of Live Before Lock, brought to you by Underdog. We're going to talk a lot about Underdog today. Odd shopper, of course, but Greg Ehrenberg is here. We don't want to waste his time. We want to jump right in and talk about what's happening with these big games today. Game one, we'll see how things shift and change for Greg when it comes to the playoffs, and also specifically with some injuries. There's a pretty big name that's out, Greg, and I know you wanted to lead with Frank Ntilikina's tonsillectomy, but I think we're going to have to start with Luka. First and foremost, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I didn't know whether you were going to talk about Frank Ntilikina. I didn't know if you were going to talk about Taurean Prince being questionable or Luka Doncic. It really could have been any of those three, but I'm good, man. It's been a minute since we've done a show together. So we were trying to figure out before, and it was probably sometime towards the tail end of football season. Yep. So yeah, it's been a minute, and we're going to talk about the games and the playoffs, and a little bit more relaxed of an LBL atmosphere, because this isn't going to be a situation where a million guys are going to get rolled out. Right. It's the playoffs. Everybody's playing everybody. So it should be easier to figure out, especially once we get past this first couple games, because then the rotations we could just assume are going to be the same for the rest of the series.
That's a good point. And I think we saw that to an extreme with the play-in games. I don't know how many people were anticipating that versus just looking at it like what we've seen kind of down the stretch. But it really is a great point. And I imagine, while we remind everybody, first off, Tyler's here. So I saw people thanking Jordan for the music. No. Make sure you thank Tyler for the music. We want him to get full credit.
Well, but that's because Jordan's the one who produces and makes the music in his apartment. So the people know that he's the one who mixes it. So that's why.
Yeah, I mean, this would be like Milli Vanilli claiming that they should get credit for the song that they stole, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I mean, same as like, Donald Glover, who, does comedy and steals people's jokes. He does music. He steals people's music. So, yeah, stuff like that. But that's why we give people the proper credit. Jordan Klein.
That was a very specific, like, did he steal one of your jokes ever?
No, but I love Patrice O'Neal, and he's my favorite comedian ever. And Patrice is dead now, and Donald Glover, when he's doing stand-up, took a bunch of his material, and I've just it's always rubbed me the wrong way.
Oh, I understand that. As somebody who understands that world, that's not in that world, but has friends like you in that world, stealing people's material is like worse than killing somebody. So I understand that.
Yeah,
or maybe it's equal to.
It's worse for this reason, because you're taking away somebody's just their entire livelihood. Because if you think about it, if somebody's a really big act and they go and they take your material, or some people are real dicks. It was something like Carlos Mencia used to do, is he would know what people's material is. He'd go on stage before them, then just do their material. Then somebody would go up on stage and not have anything they'd be like, well, he just did all my jokes. So it's frowned upon, to say the least.
All right, super chat right away. Look at that. Shout out to Linquist for the Nance call yesterday. Took down a GPP. Thanks for nothing, Greg. Ha ha ha. Since you like non-compliments. See, he's speaking to your heart. I've done way too many shows with you, to know to compliment you about anything.
Nope. I appreciate it. And congrats. That was I saw some people who played Larry Nance yesterday had some big hits. So all good stuff.
Absolutely, man. And look, there's going to be a Larry Nance call or two today that Greg's going to make that's going to win people money. Just don't thank him. That's all. Say thanks for nothing at the next day, right?
Yeah, well, I do like seeing the winning screenshots on Twitter, because I do think it's cool when we actually help people, win money from time to time. And then also, at the Awesemo Hall of Fame, because if you have the Awesemo logo and you come at the top of a tournament and you tweeted us, you could get yourself some free projections and free tools we have up on the site for a little bit.
That's true. You don't have to wait each and every day for new stuff to just drip out, as we tell people. And we'll give you all an opportunity to sign up, tell you about what's happening here throughout the show with Underdog as well, man. But let's just look at this overall. And I'm always interested how you look at things, you specifically, because there's always something that you add to it. If it's your metrics, if it's how you're looking at something, if it's circumstance, if it's weighting the field, how do things change? Like, what's the biggest thing that changes for you when we go from the regular season to the playoffs?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question, and there's a pretty easy answer, which is condensed rotations. And also what I said before, we're not going to have a situation where it's like, oh my God, look, Embiid's resting today because it's, they want to get him rest or whatever. Like, we don't have to deal with any of that nonsense. But then also, these games are so important. that we could generally bank on the best players on each team playing bigger minutes, where we're going to see probably James Harden play upwards of 40 minutes. Joel Embiid is probably going to play upper 30s minutes. And that is something that a lot of teams are going to do when they condense the rotation. Now, it's not going to apply to the Toronto Raptors per se, who the Six are playing, because they can only play so many minutes. Like Nick Nurse was playing these guys 42 minutes in regular season games. It's not like he could play them 50 in playoff games now all of a sudden. But generally, condensed rotations, it's harder to dig really deep and find crazy value plays because they're just generally not going to step on the court.
So I have to ask, is Tyler messing with you?
Oh, you don't know about this.
Yeah. No, I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it's the best thing a producer's ever done on any show I've been on. But now that I have more stuff hanging that I've got mounted on the wall behind me, not we, because this is totally Tyler. Tyler photoshops it and puts my pictures of myself up in the pictures. It's hilarious. It's amazing. Because
I saw Benny Levine ask what that pic of Greg has of him. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm looking at you on the screen. I'm looking at you now on our chat where I could see you live. And I'm thinking something is off here. So I had no idea about it. It's genius. I love it because at first I thought it was, the old picture, right, of Sinatra where he's locked up that everybody had in college.
You're dating me a little bit with the Sinatra reference.
Maybe it's like the old one. It's like I don't know who. I couldn't pick Sinatra as a kid out of a lineup. I'm just saying it's this old pic that everybody had in college of him in the mugshot is my point. That's all. Okay. So that's what I thought it was behind you. Then I was looking at here. I was like, wait a second, that's sports memorabilia.
Yeah, no, it's really funny. It's really good work by Tyler. And I guess I don't want to go too much into I think people should be able to figure it out by now, but like my mom saw like a screenshot of one of the shows once. She's like, how come you hung pictures of yourself from high school up all over your office? So she had no clue. I assume the audience has figured out by now that it's sports stuff, because if it's like Jordan producing, the stuff doesn't get edited on the wall. But it's really good work by Tyler, who deserves all the credit for that. Yeah.
Now, look, I don't know if this helps or hurts my cause, but Benny Levine with the Grateful Dead avatar says, yeah, we hung that in college. I just remember people older than me had this thing, and I was like, who is that guy? And they were like, it's Sinatra. So don't blame me. All right, let's jump into it, man. Super chat again from Oliver. We appreciate that. Tied for second place, $20 tourney last night for the over 7K hit. Thanks, fellas. Who's tonight's Larry? Also his dog's name. Do you have a Larry Nance pick under your hat right here that you're ready to fire off with right away?
I sure wish I had a Larry Nance pick. Here's what I think is a good way to do this, though, because I am actually just finalizing uploading all my lineups to FanDuel and DraftKings. I just assume I'm not going to have to make any edits because I don't think, like I said before, anything crazy is going to happen. But let me see who the lowest owned player is on both FanDuel and DK. Did he specify whether it's FanDuel or DraftKings or just in general?
Nope, just in general. Right. So you can choose. You have the ability.
By the way, did you pick up on what his name is?
Yes, Oliver Klosov. Or you could pronounce it.
Oliver Klozoff.
Yes, Oliver Klozoff.
Yes. So here's how I'm gonna look at FanDuel and DK and see which player that's sub 10% owned on each site that I'm getting the most exposure to.
Okay.
On FanDuel, right now it is Otto Porter Jr. On DraftKings, and by the way, I can't say that I'm massively confident in any of these super low owned plays, but these are just guys who are single digit owned that I'm getting double digit exposure to. Right. On DK, Matisse Thybulle, I think he could play an extended role, particularly in the home games in the series. Obviously, the road games, that's going to be a whole different scenario. And that's actually going to be something that when we start to see Philly go on the road in Toronto, we're going to have to figure out what happens to Matisse Thybulle's minutes. But I think there's a chance Philly's going to be more liberal with his playing time in home games since he can't play on the road in this series. So for that reason, I did give him a little bit of extended playing time. I also think that just his length is going to be really necessary going up against the likes of OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam. So I think that Matisse Thybulle is massively important in this series, and it's going to be a pretty big blow to the Sixers when they're playing road games in Toronto without him.
You know what's interesting about Thybulle is that if you can get north of 30 minutes from him, you're going to get probably two, maybe depending if they're trying to keep up from a shooting standpoint with Toronto, maybe 3 looks from 3. I mean, all of a sudden a 10, 3, 4 rebound night, 2 steal, depending on where you're playing, right, for that bonus, I'm with you. I think Doc is going to play the shit out of Matisse Thybulle for these 2 games as much as possible. And he's going to be out there, and people may look at him like, but look, a 3 or 4 night, a 4 or 5 night is not out of the question by any means. Pretty surprised, but I like it. I like it.
And the other thing too is it's just because of the way the rotations are so condensed in the playoffs. There are not that many guys that are super cheap on DraftKings that I like getting to, but there's obviously a lot of pay up options I like getting to. So I think this is a scenario where if we could get just anywhere in the neighborhood of like 15 to 20 fantasy points from some of these cheap guys, I think it's going to be massively important, especially on DraftKings when you consider Jokic is 10,600, ridiculous price tag for him considering the production we've seen from this year. Same with Embiid at 10,400. Harden is 9,200 on DraftKings. I think these guys are very, very likely to just crush relative to what their salaries are, but we need to find cheap guys to make them viable to play, and there aren't that many to like. So we don't need some crazy ceiling game from Matisse Thybulle. I think we just need his salary savings and just some guys like that, maybe like a Looney. Brandon Clark is another one that I have a little bit of exposure to. Just anybody that is going to enable me to pay up for these stars that are a little bit underpriced, because this is clearly where the most upside is in these tournament game in the playoff games.
Yep.
When we could expect these guys to play, upwards of 40 minutes.
So let's just look at the Doncic injury, right? And how you're attacking that here, because it's the first game and we have a couple of questions that we'll get to, Wiggins or Bane. This is a big one here for just setting the tone, building lineups, trying to see where there is any more value, or maybe countering the field that's going to somebody else on Dallas. So, Luka's out, Greg. What's the first thing you're doing with the Mavs now with that, if anything?
Yeah. So, I mean, from a projection standpoint, I think, most people are going to be pretty hip to the fact, because we've seen Luka out, multiple times this year with this kind of setup. It's going to be the majority of the value, extended minutes and playing time, going to Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie. And now talking about them, FanDuel as compared to DK. I'll bring them up separately. So first on FanDuel, Spencer Dinwiddie is priced at 6,900. He's also going to be pretty popular at around 30% ownership. I think that's about appropriate. Jalen Brunson, though, it's 7,300 when he's projected for 26% ownership. That's a little high for me. I think the price is just kind of already appropriate versus what we're expecting. It's a tough matchup against the Utah Jazz team that's fully healthy going into this game. So I have Dinwiddie project for more fantasy points than Jalen Brunson. He's also a little bit cheaper. So on DK, my preference is to get to Dinwiddie as opposed to Brunson. I'm going to be a little bit underweight to Brunson on this slate. Looking at DK when we're looking at these two guards. And also there's another player we have to talk about on DraftKings who isn't necessarily directly benefiting from the absence of Luka Doncic, but Maxi Kleber. There's just a little bit of extra usage available in that lineup. And the other thing too is when I was just mentioning before how we want to pay up for stars, Kleber's only 3,300 on DraftKings. He's going to be really popular. I also think that makes sense. I've seen people ask what I think about the chalk on Maxi Kleber being about 50% of the field's lineups. It makes sense to me. I understand why. And then also Spencer Dinwiddie, I think that he's pretty hard to avoid at just $6,300 over on DK. But then once again, Jalen Brunson at 7,200. I think he's going a little bit over-owned on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm projecting him a little bit lower than most people are.
Where are you to the field, though, with Kleber and Dinwiddie on DK? I mean, both of these guys are 50 plus, really. I mean, technically, Dinwiddie's sitting there. Last projected, I have at 50. And then we have Kleber right there at the top. And you mentioned the cost is clearly going to be incentivizing people to get with him. Even Dinwiddie at 6,300, manageable there. Do you find yourself kind of right around there, or maybe even a little under because they're so heavily owned?
Yeah, so I am playing more on FanDuel than DraftKings for this slate, but I do have builds set up for both of them. But let me run a more extended run of lineups also. But at least for FanDuel, I'm right around the field on Dinwiddie, but I am undercutting the field on Brunson. As for DraftKings, I think Kleber, you could make a case, depending how many lineups you're playing, is close to a lock play for this slate. I don't have any issue with him, just considering how weak a lot of the pay down options are. And once again, how much I want to pay up for the stars that are on this slate. So to me, Kleber, I don't even care that he's 50% owned. I want to be on him in a lot of lineups. As for Dinwiddie, it's about appropriate with him being in nearly 50% of lineups. And then once again, Brunson, to me, a little bit over owned.
What about, and I saw in the chat as well, and I think two guys that we can look at that are cheaper options that could immediately be impacted, especially if you're looking at 3-point opportunities here, would be DFS and Bullock. Both are cheaper options. Are you getting to them maybe more if it's on FanDuel first, where, DFS in that 23%, just so you have it there, and then Bullock a little lower, about 19%. So there's some leverage if you're looking to build with either or both of these guys, depending on how you see some spillover usage without Doncic on the floor.
Yeah. So as for Dorian Finney-Smith, I do think he is a stronger play on DraftKings. I mean, on a FanDuel than he is on DK, just because of his ability, number one, to get defensive stats, but then also he's a lot cheaper on on FanDuel. I keep getting them mixed up. My bad. But on FanDuel, Dorian Finney-Smith is 4,800, benefits from the extra defensive stats. On DK, he's 5,400. 54 is a little bit more than I would generally like to play for Dorian Finney-Smith. The 4,800 with the defensive stat bonuses, I think, is more appropriate on FanDuel. So DK, I'm not getting to as much from as the field is, where he's projected for 16.2% ownership. FanDuel, where he is 23.3%, I'm a little bit over that number.
So we'll bounce around. We'll take some questions here in a second. And again, we have a couple here. By the way, Thibault not out. I don't know where that came from, but
no, so Thibault's not allowed to play on the road in Toronto.
Correct. But it looked like somebody was just trying to put out there like Thibault was out today, which is fake news.
Yeah,
people still say that.
I do from time to time, but I'm never hip to anything. So maybe. But yeah, as for Thibault, because I've mentioned it before, and it could be a little bit confusing what the situation is, but because he's not vaccinated, he's not allowed to play in Canada. It does not impact his ability to play home games in Philadelphia, but he is not going to be playing in any of the games in Toronto on the road.
All right. So we have a couple of names out there that I want to get to on the chat, but I am curious on the other side of this, how, if at all, you can take advantage of no Luka with Utah, because you mentioned a very healthy Utah team outside of Donovan Mitchell. From maybe a scoring standpoint, you do have a couple of options. I don't know if you could look at somebody consistently outside of Mitchell, where you have a couple of guys who could get hot. You have Gobert down low with Powell and matchup, but I don't know if anything has changed in this game on the other side without Luka for you.
Yeah, so there's a lot of situations where it would change the other side of a game. Not for this one, though, because it's not like Luka's some stalwart defender. And by the way, he's much better defensively than people realize. I think people just say that he's a shitty defensive player, which isn't really true. But at the same time, too, it's not like he's irreplaceable on defense. But overall, if you look at Dallas's numbers this year, they were 6th in defensive efficiency, and they also played at a very slow pace. They played the slowest pace in the NBA. So this is generally not a good game environment to be attacking the Dallas Mavericks from a DFS standpoint. Those are just two things you don't want to see. Low pace of play, really strong defense. They actually, of the two teams in this game, they have the better defensive efficiency as compared to Utah, which I think a lot of people wouldn't expect that if they weren't looking at these numbers. Utah was 10th in the league in defensive efficiency this year, just slightly above average, whereas Dallas was 6th, like I said before. But as for Luka, it's not like he's the driving force as to why that defense is so good. So let's say that Rudy Gobert was out on the Utah side. Yeah. Then I'd look at okay, Hassan Whiteside is playing Rudy Gobert minutes. That is a big downgrade for the Utah Jazz defense. It's not the same case with Luka being out. I don't really think it's going to massively change the pace of play or anything. So there's nobody that I would look at from the Jazz and say okay, this player gets a boost now.
By the way, I can't get over the strength of that young fro that you have over your, not looking, but camera right shoulder here. I mean, it's hard to concentrate on your insight, Greg. I have to be honest.
Yeah,
as a fellow member of the tribe, that is a strong fro you have.
Those were the days. And also keep in mind, this was picture day, which almost certainly means that my mom made me get a haircut before. Yes.
Blowout, a little more of the blowout, like the stretch.
No. It was just, my hair was egregiously long at one point. Like I'm sure I went to get my picture taken on today. I was like, I can't believe my hair is so short because my mom made me get a cut.
Oh my goodness. Look, I'm just glad nobody's found any shit of me with hair, because it exists. You just have to go back 30 years. But
what kind of hair? Were you like frosted tips or something?
No. Come on, man.
Josh Engelman was.
Josh Engelman was. Little? Well, okay. But Josh is younger than me. He's younger than you, isn't he?
No, Josh is older than me.
Oh, okay. I never know with anybody here. but I didn't do. I stopped short on the frost tips. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I had curls as a kid up until like 6 years old. I had blonde curls. Nobody knew. A bunch of Russian Jews and Ukrainian Jews. That's all I am in my family. Nobody knew how I got these thick blonde curls in my head. And then they went away. And then it turned into a fro. And then all of a sudden it just died by about 20, 22 years old. It was done. So there's the brief history.
There we go. Did your dad have hair?
Yeah, everybody in my family has hair. Like my dad's dad has hair. My mom's dad has hair. Everybody has hair. Like the whole thing about baldness, gene, hereditary, etc. No, I'm the anomaly. So maybe I'm just not part of the family. I don't know.
And I've seen your son. He doesn't have hair either.
No, he's getting there. He's getting there. We may pull him
now.
Yeah. He's huge. He's 94th percentile. So we're gonna play something here. Maybe the violin. I don't know. Can you be 6'6" and play the violin?
I can tell you the neighbor kid who's next door to me, he plays piano all the time, and I wish his mom would stop paying for lessons because it's annoying.
There you go. You're playing a lot on FanDuel here. By the way, hit that thumbs up button, please. We're going to tell you all about what's going on here with Underdog in a second. We want you to be a part of everything happening across the board on Awesemo, including our USFL projections. You can click that link below, make some money today. I know Greg is super excited. Your Jersey Generals, right, are in action tonight.
Tell you. No clue.
My Philadelphia.
I didn't even know there was a New Jersey USFL team.
Yes. And it's not like Jersey, New York, like that World League team that had to combine multiple states. You have your own team here. So click that link below. You can get projections. I did see a question, though, because you are building a lot on FanDuel, as you mentioned. Barton or Brooks on FanDuel was one of the questions that we saw in the chat for you, Greg, just knowing that you're looking at as far as, FanDuel building a little bit more.
Yeah, so Dillon Brooks is one of my most rostered players on FanDuel today, and he's going to be really popular, but I'm still overweight to the field on him. He's projected for 40% ownership. I have him in more than half my lineups. It's just not a correct price tag for Dillon Brooks. He is 5,200, and, I understand that John Morant is back in the picture, but it shouldn't really matter to the point that he's only 5,200. I mean, the last time Morant was active, we saw Dillon Brooks priced over 6K and as high as 6,900 alongside Morant. So we're getting a big price discount on Dillon Brooks, shooting guard and small forward eligibility. He's a really high priority play for me. So that's a pretty easy one for me.
Across the board, Anthony asking, and this is just about cost because different spots here clearly, but if it's about saving money, would you rather have Dwight Powell or Bullock?
On FanDuel or DraftKings?
Your choice. Maybe FanDuel, since that's where you've been doing the majority of your building.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I have lineups on both. I'm just playing more volume, but I'll try. I mean, I'm gonna have about a similar. So I've Bullock projected a little bit better. I'm also giving him a lot of minutes today. I think if we look at what has to happen for the Utah Jazz or for the Dallas Mavericks to compete with the Utah Jazz without Luka Doncic, they're clearly the lesser talented team here. They're outgunned on paper. The Utah Jazz this year, I think their record is a little bit misleading because they did have Donovan Mitchell miss some time. Gobert missed some time. So I think they're a much better team. And also people just hate the Jazz. So I don't think people want to give them any credit, but this is a very good team. And obviously Luka Doncic being out is a big loss for Dallas. So how Dallas beats them here, number one, they have to play good team defense, but then number two, they need good 3-point variance. And Reggie Bullock is one of the better 3-point shooters on the team. So I think without Luka, I think there's a good chance that Reggie Bullock plays like 36 minutes. Yep. And to try to keep up with Utah, you try to get the 3-point variance in your favor. So I do expect that Reggie Bullock will get a lot of shot attempts.
It was a little earlier. I got in. It was minus 130, but I was fine with the number for him knocking down 3. I think DFS or Bullock, as you mentioned, are going to see some increase. Those are the easy guys to target. We'll get a little more into that in the 1 o'clock segment too, as we can look around some live stuff as it happens. Scotty Barnes was getting a lot of love on the chat. Are you building with Barnes at all today, Greg Ehrenberg?
Yeah, and particularly on FanDuel, Scotty Barnes is another guy who's just crazy underpriced. So once again, another chalk play, but one that I'm overweight to the field on because he's projected for 38% ownership, but he's 5,500. There's just some random kind of mid-range players on FanDuel that for no reason have been crazy priced down. Scotty Barnes finished the regular season at a 7,300 salary. Now the playoffs start. He's going to play probably something like 40 minutes in this game. and he's almost $2,000 cheaper than he was to finish the season. So based on what we saw from Scotty Barnes, he's in a dead heat right now with Evan Mobley in terms of the Rookie of the Year voting. If you guys keep up to date on all the known votes right now, Barnes and Mobley have the exact same amount of votes. Not that that matters for this game. I'm just kind of using it to highlight how good of a season Scotty Barnes had. And the salary is just incorrect. He's somebody who should be more expensive come the playoffs, or people like this should be more expensive come the playoffs because we're expecting such heavy workloads from him. So with the price discount making no sense, he's a really high priority play on FanDuel. As for DraftKings, let's see, where do I have Scotty Barnes on DK? I know I have more of him on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings, but on DK, he's just priced appropriately at DraftKings. He's 6,900 and projected for 7% ownership. So it's just way different when he's 6,900 as opposed to 55. So FanDuel, I'm getting to him a lot. DK, it's like if he's in a lineup, it's okay, but not a priority at all.
All right. And this was a good one here. Super chat, actually. Teddy jumping in here. Again, we always appreciate the super chats. Definitely not necessary, but definitely appreciate you out there. However much, there's never a number or a certain number that we ask for. Whatever you can throw is great. Teddy asking thoughts on Royce O'Neal on FanDuel today. Thanks, guys. Now, I've learned my lesson betting him on 3-point props, but that is completely different from the question that Teddy was asking.
I found it to be a little bit unnecessary. So the value on FanDuel is so different than the value on DraftKings because DK, it's the top end guys that are really underpriced. And then we're kind of forced to play some really cheap guys like a Maxi Kleber to be able to pay up for those guys. As far as FanDuel goes, though, when I'm mentioning guys like Dillon Brooks being 5,200 or something like Scotty Barnes being 5,500, those guys are so egregiously underpriced that I don't really feel like I have a need to roster Royce O'Neal at 3,700. And I have Royce O'Neal projected for a little bit under 20 fantasy points at 3,700. So on a points per dollar basis, that's not terrible, but still it's just unnecessary value in my opinion on this particular slate. So I have him in less than 5% of my lineups.
All right. So again, reminder, if you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed here to our DFS channel, our Odd Shopper channel, as well as we continue to grow that. And our projections are tools today that are free because we always want you to sign up for $29.95 Awesemo Plus weekly pass, get you everything. So you don't have to wait for stuff to be free. As Greg mentioned in the beginning of the show here, our MLB player projections are free. Our NHL top stacks are free. Our MMA fighter rankings. And for here, most importantly, our NBA main slate ownership projection. So our ownership, what we're using to talk about the field and where everything is free today. And all we're asking in return is not only to bear with us and through my ridiculous stories, but to hit the thumbs up button and make sure that you applaud Tyler for that great. The one on the left, I'm telling you, I'm going to send you this in the chat. The one on the far left looks like that old poster here. All right. So there was one after the super chat that I wanted to get to outside of Royce O'Neal. It was Jordan Poole or Klay Thompson. Both sites. Where are you looking at if you had to make a choice between those two?
Yeah, so Jordan Poole was so good to finish the season, but why was Jordan Poole so good? It's because he played an extended role with Steph Curry out. Now the playoffs are starting. Steph Curry's back, and I'm not really sure what to make of Steph Curry's minutes because he's been off for so long. When I was talking before about how it's the playoffs, we could expect guys to play full minutes. I'm not necessarily sure that applies to Steph Curry in the same way because, you know, how long has it been since Curry last played? His last game was on March 16th. So it's been a month since Curry played, and it was also a lower body injury. So it's totally different when you're talking about a finger injury like Jared Allen had or an elbow injury like Paul George. When it's a foot injury, you know, there's actual risk of re-injury and also chance that he just isn't well conditioned because you can't do cardio and practice in the same way when you have a foot or an ankle injury. So I'm being a little more conservative with Steph Curry's minutes. I could be wrong on that. Maybe he goes out and plays 40. I tend to think that's not all that likely. But that aside, those minutes, a lot of them are coming directly from Jordan Poole. So with that in mind, Klay Thompson's going to start and play his normal role. Poole, it to me takes a bit of a step back with Curry back.
How about this one? Would you rather play Brunson, Dinwiddie, or both if you're playing just one lineup, one cash lineup?
Dinwiddie.
Not both. You don't want any part of it.
Well, it depends. It depends which site also.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
If it's No, it's still just Dinwiddie for me, actually, because my highest projected lineups have Dinwiddie and don't have Brunson.
How are you using the change in FanDuel with what's happened here with the rostering, the positions in the playoffs?
How?
Like the power
I mean,
forward center spot.
it's not like it's dumb, but it's not something. I mean, it's still like I'm just running my lineups, my projections, and comparing it to the ownership and where I have guys projected relative to where other people might have them projected. It's not something where it's like, oh my God, Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic are power forwards. It changes everything for me. The one thing that does make a difference is it's easier to get those guys into lineups when they both have power forward eligibility versus when they both have center, because you have to make a choice on a lot of slates. Do I want to roster Embiid? Do I want to roster Jokic? Do I want to go cheaper at center? That doesn't matter for today. We could play both of them in a lot of lineups. So it doesn't change anything in terms of what I'm doing when I look at the slate. When I just run my lineups, I get to more of Jokic and Embiid than I normally would. For me, I love that when I could play more of Jokic, and it's just more spots to fit them in.
Do you find yourself on FanDuel taking advantage of that specifically today because there's no Luka, and maybe one less pay up option allows you to funnel and save elsewhere and roster both both Luka Doncic, both Jokic and Embiid in the same lineup?
Yep, I know what you mean. And yes, it's not something where it's like, oh, Luka's out, I want to play these guys or they benefit from that. But to your point, there's less pay up options now, where if you look at the guys that we have to pay up for on FanDuel today, there's only 2 players over 10K. It's Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. The pricing is so soft on FanDuel that it's fairly easy to pay up for them, even at 12,000 for Jokic, 11,300 for Embiid. So you're kind of forced to, just based on what the pricing is on FanDuel, because we have to spend the salary somewhere when you got guys like Dylan Brooks and Scotty Barnes so egregiously underpriced. So I'm getting to way more of them than I normally would, and as is everybody else.
All right. Contrarian center question. Adams and Gobert as contrarian center plays. Again, we factor in that it's not as strict of a contrarian play on FanDuel because you can now add that 4-5 roster spot. But if it's FanDuel, if it's DK, if it's both for you, either or maybe one of those appeal to you more as a contrarian play at the center spot?
Well, they are both very popular on FanDuel. So I assume it's not a FanDuel question because we have Adams and Gobert both projected for north of 20% ownership on FanDuel. If it is a DraftKings question, let me see where we currently have the ownership projected for these guys. Rudy Gobert at 10% at 8,000. I kind of think that's a thin play. I don't really have that much interest in him on DK. Adams also is really popular on DraftKings. So there's not really a scenario where Adams is a contrarian play. Gobert is on DK, but I don't really have that much interest in him at 8K when you consider that he's 8K, but Embiid is 10.4 and Jokic is 10.6. So that just kind of squeezes Gobert.
Who would be on FanDuel? I'm looking at it here. I mean, Powell is getting about 13.5%. You start to drop a little bit. You reference Looney at 6.2. Maybe that's a contrarian option. And then you start to get into like, the Achuas and Boosh ranges of it. Did you have outside of the ones that we mentioned, because like on FanDuel, as you just said, Adams and Gobert catching too much ownership to really be a counter there. And even Cat, I mean, there's no contrarian play there either. He's getting more than both of those mentioned. So who would be somebody that you would be getting to that would be more of the contrarian center spot? Looney?
Looney at 6% ownership. I'm a little bit overweight to the field on him. I'm not getting a crazy amount of Looney or anything, but I could see them potentially. I think they might play him a little bit more to match up against the size of Jokic. And I don't know exactly. So I mentioned before when it comes to Steph Curry that I don't know what his minutes are going to look like. Draymond Green's been hurt for a lot of the season also, and I'm not sure that Draymond is going to go out and play 40 minutes just because it's the playoffs. So I think we could see a couple extra minutes for Looney. It's been a weird season for him because he was a fantasy, I won't say a stud, but he was a really good source of value for a little while. And then all of a sudden his minutes just kind of dissipated, and so did his fantasy upside. There's a chance he gets a couple more minutes in the playoffs. So just because the question is what contrarian centers are like, he's the only guy that I'm rostering, at all at center on FanDuel that's sub 10% owned.
Super Coop 30 asking Bones or Bev. Bones, Highland, or Bev? Now that's on FanDuel. Sorry,
it's Patrick Beverley on both sites.
Without a doubt. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we did talk about that with Jokic and Joel. If you're just looking, so outside of how much you're stacking together, who do you think you're getting to more on your lineups, FanDuel NDK, right? If that just have one of them, who are you building more with?
I mean, everybody's going to know that I'm a Nikola Jokic guy. That's my dude. He's about to win back-to-back MVPs. I made money on it last year, going to make money on it this year. He was probably my most rostered player on 50 slates this year. I love Nikola Jokic. I think he's the best player in the NBA. He's the best fantasy producer in the league. And the only way the Warriors are, because the team around him is terrible. The only way that the Nuggets are going to be competitive with the Warriors, other than just Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray unexpectedly coming back and being really good right out of the gate, is Jokic is going to have to play like 40 minutes per game and just annihilate the Warriors. There's no way where Jokic has subpar games and they win. So I think that Jokic is going, and the other thing also, Jokic comes off the court, it's Boogie Cousins minutes, everything goes to shit immediately. So there's, from a betting angle, here's something that I also think makes sense. Assuming this is what the Nuggets playoff rotations are, I think that Jokic is going to play all 12 minutes in the first quarter. And then I think he sits for the first 4 minutes or so of the second quarter. So I think it makes sense to bet the Warriors to be like the first team to score 10 points and the first team to score 15 points in the second quarter.
Wow, look at that. That is a sharp, small market play right there, man.
I mean,
Warriors first to 20 in the second quarter.
But just from the standpoint of, because that's when I assume Jokic is going to sit.
No, I'm not pushing back on it. I'm going to see where I can bet it. Absolutely. It makes sense. Absolutely. And, I think overall, if you're looking at it from the two, the only thing that I would say with Embiid is that it's similar where they don't have anybody behind him. And he's played so much this year that I unfortunately am just waiting for that other shoe to drop. Like I'm waiting for game 4 of this series where he looks like he hasn't played basketball all year. Like he looks like Luka coming in off the offseason, just gassed. And I don't think that's going to happen with Jokic. But my point being, Greg, is that could happen with Embiid today. Like Embiid has played so much, especially down the stretch, unnecessarily to try to win this stupid MVP award that he's not going to win, that he's probably going to look gassed today.
Jokic never gets tired. It is the most absurd thing.
How is that possible?
He's a cardio machine. He's just this unassuming super athlete. And I could not disagree more with Josh Gilmour saying, chill, Greg. He's not the best player in the NBA, but top 5. Dude, he's about to win his second consecutive MVP award. He's going to win MVP.
Look, you don't think Giannis is better than Jokic?
No.
On his best day?
No. I mean, on anybody's best day, they could.
Well, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. No, but to me, it's Jokic.
I would go Embiid third. I just want to set that out so people don't think I'm some crazy lunatic in Philadelphia here. I'm just a crazy lunatic. Doesn't matter where I am. But okay. Oh, look, I'm not gonna push back on you. People want to win some money here. We got a super chat. Eddie C's in the house. Who are your core guys? Maybe 2 or 3 guys that you are looking at. Maybe 2, right? We don't want to give away all your secrets here today. 2 guys that you feel like you're building with on multiple range. If you want to look at a pay up option that you feel like you're looking as far as a core guy in your builds, as well as maybe more of a cheaper option that you were building with, or any way you want to answer this question. Greg, it's your world. He's just asking who are the core guys for a DK GPP.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got 15 minutes to go into lock here. I think it would be helpful if I just kind of read off who my most rostered players are at each position for DraftKings, and I'll do it for FanDuel as well. But at least for DK, and it's something that Eric and I have done for a lot of these slates. Here's my 2 most rostered players at each position on DraftKings and FanDuel. So DK at point guard, it is Dinwiddie and Beverly. At shooting guard, it would also be Dinwiddie, but I already said him there. So Dillon Brooks and James Harden. Small forward, also Dillon Brooks, but Matisse Thybulle and OG Anunoby. Power forward, Maxi Kleber and Thybulle already talked about him. So Draymond Green. And then at center, it is Jokic and Embiid.
All right. So, and that's,
and then, sorry, one second. I'll read off for FanDuel as well.
Yeah, that's sorry. That's what I asked.
So everybody knows what's up. Point guard on FanDuel, Beverly and Morant. 8,800 for Morant is an egregious price tag over on FanDuel. Shooting guard, Dillon Brooks and James Harden. Small forward, James Harden having small forward eligibility is absolutely ridiculous on FanDuel. That aside, Brooks, Harden, already said them. Also Barnes and Bane, power forward, also Barnes there, but Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and then center also Embiid, Jokic. But Jaren Jackson Jr., good center play as well on FanDuel.
How much are you getting with Harden today, just across the board? I know pricing can always impact, and there is this expectation. All right, you've been kind of chilling a little bit. It's playoffs. Maybe you could ramp it up a little bit. I know that the productivity hasn't been there for a lot of people, but still, I mean, you mentioned not many people are going to be out there on the bench. This could be a lot of minutes for James Harden.
Yeah. So for me with Harden, here's something that I'm playing a lot of Embiid today. Okay. And that's something like I don't want to have a ton of lineups that have both Embiid and Harden. That, and also in terms of pay up options, I prioritize Morant. I prioritize Embiid and Jokic all ahead of Harden. It's not a knock on Harden. He's still in like a good portion of my lineups. But on FanDuel, and actually both FanDuel and DraftKings, I have them in around 30% of lineups.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, just generally building. That's all.
Yeah.
All right. So there's so much now with Jokic and Embiid and John Morant. Tobias asking on.
We have a bunch of super chat. We had a bunch of super chats and questions in Discord too, by the way.
Do you see those? I'm sorry. I didn't have
Yeah, no, it's cool. I'll answer. So Michael McKinney, who's asking us his usual question. He always comes in with this. Greg, you already know 2 spend ups, 3 values for FanDuel on cash. So in terms of spend up options, I think it just has to be Embiid and Jokic, especially when they both have power forward and center eligibility. It's not difficult to fit both of them into the lineup. So that's kind of it by default for me. As for the value plays, I think we could consider Dillon Brooks and Scotty Barnes both value plays relative to what their price is on FanDuel. So they would certainly make the cut for me. As for the next value play, I guess Patrick Beverly would be the other one. So two best pay up options, Jokic, Embiid. 3 value plays, I'll go Barnes, Brooks, and Pat Bev.
Okay. And so another super chat here. You already know 2 spend ups, right? That was the one. Nelson Resto, last spot, DK forward, 3,700. Who's the best pick?
All right. So
3,700. That's your cap.
The answer is Maxi Kleber. I'm going to assume he's probably already played Maxi Kleber. If I'm wrong, then it's Maxi, but I want to give him a second pick just in case he does that, just in case that he's already played Maxi. So 3,700 or lower. That is Thibault for me.
Okay, yeah, that again is a guy that, just to remind people if they're not here, Greg was talking about that right away. That was one of your Larry Nance plays tonight, right? Thibault?
Yeah, if only we could land on another Larry Nance who just had everything break perfectly for him. But I'll say in terms of low on GPP play, yes.
Okay. Look, I would be nobody here outside of like maybe Mike Awesemo, who I saw weighing in on the chat. Nobody here would be happier than Matisse Thybulle being Larry Nance today than me and Mike. So trust me, even in a real world, you got people rooting for you, Greg. All right.
Hey, I know. Well, I know Mike. I'm sure the next time I see him, he'll be fully outfitted in Sixers garb. Do we have any other super chats, or
I'm looking here on the regular chat.
Okay,
Nothing on this. Yeah, maybe the Discord, just not on.
Yeah. I'll answer some of the questions in Discord because I was added on them, and you might not have been.
No, bro. First from you tell me. You ready?
What
you
ready
go.
Just for the Discord questions, you mean?
Correct. I'm sorry.
Okay, cool. We've got from Fingers, rank these pay down options on FanDuel, Kleber, Thibault, and Bullock. Let's see. Of those guys, who am I getting the most exposure to for FanDuel out of Maxi, Thibault, and Bullock? So that is Bullock 1 for me.
Okay.
And keep in mind, this is FanDuel, not DraftKings. So Maxi 2. Totally different situation with Maxi being 3,800 on FanDuel as opposed to 3,300 on DK. And then Thibault is third of me of those 3. Also Thibault, different situation where he's 4K on FanDuel as opposed to 3,400 on DK. Okay. Next question here is from Perrin. Any suggestions on rules on Fantasy Cruncher for 150 lineups on DK? Is it a must to have as much of possible as Jokic and Embiid or Siakam, I very much prefer Jokic and Embiid to Siakam. I don't think Siakam is anywhere near those two in terms of options. And then how are your I don't understand this part of the, how are your top must leverage? All right, so I'll just answer the first part then. I don't have any specific rule set up, and Jokic and Embiid I have a ton of, and Siakam less so.
Okay. All right. Good enough. Now we have another one. Any priorities in the second game? This is from Jeff Williams. Nice little super chat. No, it's not Thad Young Revenge Day. Jeff Williams, any priorities in the second game on DK for cash when you just look at that Wolves Grizzlies game? I mean, maybe it's Ja and Cat.
For cash games on DraftKings,
Correct.
I think the answer is I wouldn't say a priority. I think Dylan Brooks is a good cash game play, but not a priority. For DraftKings pricing, I don't think this is one of the better games. Actually, I think this is probably the game I have the least exposure to today on DraftKings. If I had to say one guy is the best cash game option, it's Dylan Brooks on DK there.
What game do you have the most exposure to overall? Do you know?
Let me see.
It's always the short questions that I put you on the spot on, and I never talk long enough.
Well, it's just because I have to look at the
I know
data to find out. So it's going to be really different on FanDuel and DraftKings. So, like FanDuel, there's guys like so Ja Morant and Dylan Brooks both have egregious broken price tags on FanDuel. So Memphis is the team I get the most exposure to on FanDuel. DraftKings, where they're just priced appropriately, I don't get nearly as much exposure to them. So DraftKings purposes, it is the 76ers actually, because Embiid's a good option. Harden's a good option. I get some exposure to Thibault as a pay. Actually, no, never mind. It's Dallas. I didn't scroll far. Yeah, it's Dallas by a lot.
Yeah, and that
Dallas won, 76ers too.
6,400 on DCAT. I don't know how much it may change for you, but are you getting to much Tyrese Maxey with that kind of third, depending on what's going on with Harris, could be that third or even secondary scorer in a game. But I don't know if it's either the position or maybe the cost that would serve as a deterrent for you.
So I wanted to answer one thing because people are asking about Maxi Kleber. And a couple of people have said they don't understand why Maxi Kleber is so popular. Luka's out for Dallas today, so it stands to reason there's just minutes to fill. Maxi's going to have to play extended minutes, and there's extra usage to go around. And he's so cheap, he doesn't have to be a great fantasy producer. If you get, say, 34 minutes out of Maxi Kleber, 36 minutes, something like that, and let's say he only scores 0.75 fantasy points per minute, which is a pretty low bar, he still projects pretty easily as the best value play on the slate. So that's why. It's just because of the injury situation in a spot where it's the first game of the first round of the playoffs, and there just isn't that much value to be had in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Did you see there was another one too? Just about Tyrese Maxey, what I had, and also Danny Green. I saw Antoine Murphy, Maxey and Green, solid plays. Now, I should let it be known, I stopped short of suggesting Danny Green, but that may change for you. I was just more curious about Tyrese Maxey. But again, as a cheaper option with somebody who's coming off and really there to shoot and knock down threes, maybe there is a pathway to some Green if it's more of a punt option.
And also, by the way, as for people saying Kleber not starting, that doesn't really change that much for me. I still think he plays a healthy amount of minutes off the bench. I don't have him projected crazy high. I have Maxey projected for 21 fantasy points on DraftKings. It still makes him the best value play by a lot.
I don't know if you've seen this, but Tyler has now updated your background. So,
oh, nice. No, I'll see that later.
Okay.
We do have a super chat from
I was
Deacon
just about
2.
to read that.
Oh, okay.
Do you see Deacons? Is that the one you see?
Yeah, you can read it.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure that you caught the change in the background too. Deacon 2, the legend. Is there a first Deacon the legend? And this is the second? FanDuel, single entry, Embiid or Jokic? We already know where Greg's going.
Yeah, Deacon Jr., the legend. It's Jokic for me. I've been a Jokic guy the entire season. I project him higher than every other player on this slate, and that's fairly normal for me. So Jokic.
Seriously, man, if you haven't hit the thumbs up button for the artwork that Greg brings to every show alone, And I'm just glad that I wasn't the only one who didn't know what was going on, because I've seen like 4 or 5 people ask, hey, what's going on with that? Who's the cab driver behind Greg? See? All right. Trey Burke. Is Trey Burke a thing? Dub K123 wants to know.
Is he a thing? He's a human being that exists, but one that I think is going to play probably like one rotation in the first half, maybe one rotation in the second half, and barring foul trouble or something, he just comes in and gets really hot. I don't think he plays enough to matter. You
mentioned that we were talking at least about getting to different games. What are you doing with Toronto a little bit more specifically with Siakam here in this slate?
Yeah, so Siakam, first I'll start by talking about him over on FanDuel.
Chats I'll get to in a sec. Yep.
Yeah, he's just really expensive. He's $9,800, and I think there's an opportunity cost of rostering him, which means I can't pay up as much for guys like Jokic and Embiid, which is problematic for me because I really like them a lot. $8,900 on DraftKings is a little more tenable, but once again, he's projected to be fairly popular. I'm underweight to the field on. But I had to roster him on one side. I prefer him on DraftKings to FanDuel, but just not a very high priority play for me because once again, I want to play more of Jokic. I want to play more of Embiid. I want to play Morant. I want to play James Harden, and Siakam just isn't quite at the level of those guys for me.
Jansen White on the super chat. Thank you, Jansen, and all the other super chats. Will Whiteside, you're going to get 15 minutes from Whiteside today?
I have him projected for 14, so Ooh. I have to say just under that.
So that's a no, Jansen. So take that for what it's worth, by all means.
Yeah, I think we see 34 minutes for Gobert, 14 for Whiteside, unless this is a blowout.
All right. Also, just a reminder, we told you about what's going on with the USFL. How about Underdog? We want you to be a part of the NBA playoffs, including today's $15K Saturday Slam. All right. $3,000 going to first place. Head to underdogfantasy.com. You can click the video link right there on the description below. Download their app if you haven't already. I mean, we do so much content for Underdog on Awesemo across the board. There's really no excuse for you not to be fully prepared and win some money there. In fact, sign up with our promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. You know the drill, all one word, all caps, and you can double your first deposit up to $100. All right, Awesemo, and you can double that up to $100 at Underdog. And Tony, appreciate that. Nice super chat. Thanks, guys. Good luck all. Is there another one that you saw in the Discord? Thibault or Danny Green, FanDuel GPP. I'm guessing that's from Brian Underwood. I'm guessing you're leaning Thibault here.
Thibault or Danny Green? That is Thibault.
Yeah. Is Danny Green a thing?
He's also a person that exists who is not going to be in my lineups today. Somebody we might have to play, though, once we get to those road games in Toronto when Thibault is in the mix, but not for today. We have a question from Supac00P in our Discord channel. He's asking, is Chris Boucher a good cheap play on FanDuel today? There's a small chance there's upside in Boucher, but those minutes are so difficult to project, and I don't think the value that he brings is necessary, so I am not getting to Boucher today.
Okay, and again, if you haven't hit that like button, please make sure you're subscribed here. Getting right down to another minute or so. So if there's anything else, Greg, that you've seen that you want to get out, any last piece of information before things officially lock up and we kind of just breeze into that extra half hour, now's the time.
We have a 3v3 question from Fingers in our premium Discord channel. He's asking Harden, Jokic, Looney, or Mitchell, Embiid, Adams. That is Harden, Jokic, and Looney for me. Also, Perrin updated his question before. He asked how much leverage you have or is healthy on 150 lineups for Jokic and Embiid. How much leverage you have? I'm playing a lot of Jokic and Embiid. I'm overweight to the field on both of them.
Yeah, I mean, even on both sides, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, really, there hasn't been, I mean, Draymond Green, is there anybody that we've seen that's at the top that you're truly underweight or staying away from? Not a full fade by any means. Draymond's getting 31.5. We didn't really talk about him on DK, 6,100 on that 4-5 spot. Are you under the field there, that 31%?
On Draymond, on DK, I'm pretty close to. In terms of players that I'm underweight to, though, okay. I mentioned it before, Jalen Brunson on DraftKings.
Sure.
I'm underweight to. The other one is Pascal Siakam. I'm underweight to in terms of some higher end guys on DK. For FanDuel, the high end guys that I'm underweight to, once again, Karl Anthony Towns is one of them. Once again, just when I'm trying to prioritize Embiid and Jokic, that leaves me less room for Karl Anthony Towns. So I'm underweight to Cat and Brunson on high end on FanDuel.
You're over or right on Brooks, right? You've been talking a lot about getting to Brooks on FanDuel. How does that impact what you're doing with Bane and Morant, if at all?
No real impact. At least not intentionally. I love Morant on FanDuel at 8,800. That's said before, a pretty broken price tag. That's incorrect. Desmond Bane at 5,900 also, I think, is a pretty good play. Who's going about appropriately owned. But the guy I'm getting the most exposure to from Memphis on FanDuel is Dillon Brooks.
So Jeff Williams, big super chat. Appreciate you, Jeff. Boosh, Precious, Beasley, or Vandy? Last man in on DK for his utility. He's got 4,400 left, hence that grouping.
All right, so let me see who I have, because I might have somebody else that I prefer for 44. Let's see. 4,400. I think the best answer is Malik Beasley.
All right. What do you have projected for Beasley? I'm curious. He's always a sneaky 3-point prop play if I can get minutes. If I can get volume from him, then I like to at least see what I can get on the books for a number. But it is so much of that is predicated on what he's projected, right? I mean, if you don't have him deep in this game, I ain't touching him.
Yeah, so I think we have a pretty good feel for his minutes because we've seen the Grizzlies in a playoff type atmosphere. Last game they played against the Clippers, it wasn't a do or die game, but it was definitely a game that obviously had massive implications. The Grizzlies would much rather be the 7 seed than have to be the 8 seed and play the Suns in the first round. So we saw Beasley play 28 and a half minutes in that game. I think it's a pretty good indication he's going to play extended minutes. Now, Patrick Beverley got into foul trouble. Anthony Edwards got into foul trouble, and that definitely buoyed his playing time a little bit. But I expect him to play. I have him for 24 minutes today, so I think he's going to be in the mix. But what are his 3-point props? I know you like your overs on 3-point props. I have a feeling I might like the over on Beasley based on how I have him projected there.
All right, let's look, my friend. I'm glad you asked here because I always try to get an eye on things, especially with you, because you look at it from your own.
By the way, while you're looking at that,
yes,
this is a question both of us can answer from B-Ball Man in our premium Discord channel. He wants to know what my favorite type of matzah is. None of it. It all tastes terrible.
The only time matzah ever works is if you can work it in eggs, like scrambled eggs. So it has to be like cooked, right? I guess like however it's prepared in scrambled eggs. And but if it's just matzah, like, let me say this. Okay. 75% of my family is Israeli Palestinian heritage. Like it's all from the same area, right? We have some of the worst food on the planet. It's awful. It's just terrible, right? And matzah is right there up with it. I mean, the whole thing was that they had to get the hell out of the desert. They couldn't leaven the bread, right? It wasn't supposed to taste good.
It was a mistake.
Right.
They didn't want that shit either.
No.
But as for here's something you could do with it that makes it edible. You take matzah and you put it in the microwave with tomato sauce and like cheddar cheese on it, and you make like pizza out of it.
Wow. So you're essentially using that as this is like the Jewish boboli. Is that what you're saying?
So I cannot eat dairy.
Right.
But there's very good dairy-free cheese, which I can't taste the difference. But that's what you could do. You take a piece of matzah, put some tomato sauce on it, you put some shredded cheese, and you got like a matzah pizza.
Oh my goodness, man. That is amazing right there. I love
In general, though, matzah is garbage. It's
full on agree. Full on. Is there anything that we eat? Like, who the hell wants to sit down and eat gefilte fish? It's not even a real fish.
Here's matzo balls are good. Matzo balls.
Yeah, but it has to be in a chicken type soup. It has to be in a soup. You're not going to the groceries and ordering just matzo balls and popping them while you're on the couch watching game 1 of the playoffs, right?
No, like the only food that I would say that my mom ever made growing up that was like like considered like Jewish type food that I thought is any good is matzo ball soup.
Yes. And I totally agree. That is undefeated. By the way,
unless we could claim bagels, it's it's bad food.
Best bagels I've ever had in my life. Jewish bakery up in Montreal. Apparently that's where the water starts that comes down to where you and I grew up, that like that New York area. So it's really clean. So
I think I've heard of this place, by the way.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I was there for 2 months or so. And so, you got to check these bagels out. They were amazing. Amazing. It tasted like a clean New York bagel, if that makes sense. Tyler's like, what the hell are these idiots talking about?
Yeah, Tyler has never seen a Jew in his entire life before this, living in Texas. This is totally foreign to him. He's like,
that's not true. That's not true. Let me defend myself. When I was in college, I made my first Jewish friend. That's 100% true. But yeah, the matzo ball, never had one. You started explaining it there for a second. I thought it was a runoff of queso, so I got excited, but apparently not. Now I'm sad. I don't know what y'all are talking about at this point.
Oh my goodness, man. This is amazing. I like Borat.
I'll put matzo ball soup up there with anything. Everything else, though.
No, you're right, though. Yeah, like if we were to take a bite, if you will, no pun intended, off of that Chappelle skit where they had like the racial draft. If we had like food that represented everybody's culture, I think our only choice here would be to put up matzo ball soup, right?
Yeah, unless I don't know what like I said, I guess we would just draft bagels with our first round pick, but we don't have good food.
Can nobody else claim bagels? I just want to make sure, nobody else can claim bagels but us.
No. Let's see.
What about the chain bagel spots now? Just curious. By the way, there's no Beasley up on the books. Your boy though, Pat Bev, is up here, and here's what's interesting about Beverly. Is he's sitting at over 1.5 at plus 110. Recently, he hasn't been called upon to knock down a bunch of threes, but there was a stretch, Greg, and I know because I was betting him, where it was just like somebody was out or somebody was cold, and then all of a sudden, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Because I'm sure it transferred a little to DFS as well, where Bev just had these games. So he had a stretch of 10 games where he was knocking down threes and he was performing, not just, defending. So 1.5 threes. I don't know if you have any interest in that, but over 1.5 threes at plus 110 just kind of piqued my interest a little bit. I can't get Beasley on the book.
I have Beverly projected right around 2 threes, so I don't mind that. Here's one thing to what you were saying before when it came to Patrick Beverly. You can't really compare those scenarios because, like you said, there were so many games where guys were out, or even there was games where Edwards played. But remember, he had that knee issue that bothered him for a month where he just didn't play well. Towns missed a couple of games here and there. Russell was probably questionable 20 games this season, and then also missed some games. So I wouldn't just look at that as being indicative of anything. But yeah, I have Beverly. Like I said, I have him right around 2 threes. So plus money, I think that's a good number.
And to be clear for me, not to respond to you, I think for others there, this was just, I think, more of a confidence boost that if shit went wrong, he was able to step up. Not that I can count on him every time to put up that level, but it was kind of cool because, if Russell or Edwards is cold, then we've at least seen Beverly in this position. All right, so over 1.5, it's at plus 108. It's dipped a little bit since you've said something. People have raced to the book and hit that. You have moved the line, Greg Ehrenberg.
Well, I think it's a good number to bet the over on, and I've found this a lot as of late, and as much as sometimes we might needle Eytan for taking his overs on threes or whatever. I actually do think some of the least efficient prop markets are probably the defensive stats and the threes, just because they get bet less often than some of the other ones. Because if something's off on a points prop or something like that, it's going to get bet a lot and pretty quickly, and it's going to move the market. I just don't know there's going to be that many spots where somebody's like, oh, look, this guy is plus 160 for over 0.5 threes, and I have him projected for over 1. And I'm like, that's an incredible. I just don't think many people are recognizing that. And the same goes for, steals, blocks, threes. They're kind of all grouped together. All numbers that we have on OddsShopper now, by the way.
Perfect transition too, because it's amazing. I'll go there and I'll do my own data. I'll do my own stuff, my own process now, trying to mirror all you big pros out here with my little 3-point niche market. And then I'm going to Odd Shopper because I'm curious. I want to see what they have projected. And it's great because I can take advantage of this smaller market. And you're right. Like, people may be paying attention to Ja Morant or D'Angelo Russell's threes, but they ain't paying attention to Jaren Jackson Jr. or, Patrick Beverly to that level. So there's some sneaky spots. And then when it comes to defensive stats, I mean, that's where I start there, because you can really, on a lot of these books, take advantage of one or even two plays from Odd Shopper based off projections. A lot of nice, like, 2-leg parlays that are plus EV from Odd Shopper, because both are defensive stats, taking advantage, as you just said, of that smaller market. So absolutely, I think it's working. I mean, that's another thing that I see too, is people will post these slips in the betting Discord and like, 2, 3, 4. And these are the markets, to your point, especially defensive markets.
Yeah, and then also, while we're on the topic of Odd Shopper, I'm going to pull it up. So the first game, that's locked. It's about to tip off. I assume it hasn't tipped off yet. I haven't checked. But it was funny. We really got caught off guard with the first play-in game. Eric and I we were going on it, and we we're trying to use that wiggle room where there's usually no like that 15 minutes because games never tip off on time. So we're sitting here like assholes talking about our favorite bets from the first game, not realizing it had already started and they're playing because the game tips off early. When has that ever happened for an NBA game?
Never.
We got to 7:00. It tipped off immediately. We're trying to figure out our best bets, and
that's hilarious.
The game
was
already
still
underway.
Hasn't tipped, right?
Does not look like it.
No. So think of the difference there. We're now 12 minutes, but you're right. Usually a 1:00 Eastern is like a 1:10. So I don't think you were wrong to assume that you had that window by any means.
No, and it's usually a thing too, where when we're doing the few minutes we do post lock, I usually pull the games up on my other monitor here so I could stream them. But I didn't even think to do it because I usually wait a few minutes. But on the topic here of defensive stats, there's one that's near the top of the board on Odd Shopper that I also think makes a lot of sense. And I'm actually about to bet it right now. Klay Thompson over 0.5 threes is plus 195. We haven't projected for 0.6 blocks. I haven't projected for 0.7 blocks.
Ooh.
So he's a little more likely to have a block in this game than not have a block. And the number's just pretty significant plus money. So these are the kind of defensive stat numbers that I was talking about before that I just think make a lot of sense and where I think the market's a little bit inefficient.
Yeah, especially as we get closer to tip, right? Because projections may update things along those lines. So you're really getting great value on that. So that's over a half block for Klay, right? Yeah.
So
plus 185. I have it. Oof.
Yep. So the question is just, will Klay have a block or not have a block? Yep. It's a 50-50 to me, right? It's the 0.5 number is fair. That's an accurate number. The plus 195 number that's available is not fair. I mean, it's not fair. It's not accurate. That's where I think there's real value, is that it's something that is a 50% chance of hitting, but implied odds of like 30%.
Right. And you see the ROI, which is 30%. So what's the break even point? Plus 185. It can't be much, right? So we're looking at break even point of 35% on that.
Yep.
It's not bad for a guy who just needs a block and is going to be out there, 35 plus minutes we anticipate tonight?
Yeah. And also, I mean, if you look at Klay Thompson's numbers this year, is he a prolific shot blocker? No, obviously not. But he averaged half a block per game this year. So everything kind of indicate, and also don't forget he averaged half a block per game, with a lot of it being limited minutes because he's coming back from a torn Achilles and a torn ACL. So for the year, he averaged 29 minutes and 0.5 blocks. Just considering that, you would think, if you're getting plus money on the over on blocks, it makes sense. But then you also consider, instead of playing 29 minutes today, which he averaged in the regular season, we're probably looking at like 36 to 38 minutes from Klay. So that's a good value bet.
There's another one too that's right there, especially when you look at the ROI. It's right at the top, and it's got a pretty good gap between what Alex has on site versus what the books are asking. And it's right behind where Tyler has Klay, and that's Cat, the rebounds. You go over 9.5 rebounds. I mean, the projection on Awesemo, which is free every time you go to Odd Shopper, of course, is nearly 2 full boards over what Cat is asked to get on the books. And on top of that, you're getting plus 115 back at the book. We just talked about this value and getting plus money on that for that wide of a projection. It's just so hard to ignore that play. Yeah.
And if you look at the numbers overall for Karl-Anthony Towns this year, he averaged 10 rebounds per game. Over the last 2 months, he averaged 10.1. So we did see his rebounds be a little bit higher in the second half of the season than the first half. And the other thing too, kind of like with that Clay bet, it's plus money on the over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that makes sense. You can get it up to plus 115 if you go to Odd Shopper and check out the best odds available at different books.
Now, any interest in putting the two of them together?
No, I prefer betting them I prefer betting them individually.
You don't want to be greedy.
I know you feel differently, but
no. Look, I know. Don't look as crazy and belligerent as some of these plays that I come out with for you and the purposes of these shows, which I'll play, by the way. Ultimately, I'm playing 85% single bets, and I'm sprinkling. You just see the 15%. I mean, that's all.
Okay,
that's all. It's like the iceberg, right? Like everything is below water. You just see the top part. That's all.
Yeah, iceberg or the alligator. You see the alligator approaching with just the head above water. All right, I got you.
Okay,
I got you.
That's all. That's all. No. I will bet. I will be fiscally responsible. I'm betting both. All right, Thompson over a half at plus money and Cat over 9.5 rebounds, both at plus money. There's no need to parlay this. As Greg Ehrenberg is correct, you ain't gonna get rich stacking all this stuff together, right?
I mean, you could. It's just not likely.
True. Right. Very true. I stand corrected. By the way, that game has tipped. So. What, 115? The one game that tips on time was the game that you and Emac had, or Eric.
No, it was me, the other Eric. Eric Lindquist, not 2024 president.
Look at that.
Not 2024 president Eric.
I had my Awesemo hoodie ready to go here, but the kid just spit up all over it. So I didn't know what was better. You don't want to wear.
Oh my! He's not a fan of the company, then, is he?
No. He's just a fan of ruining everything that I have on. He is a very spiteful individual, Greg. All right.
You just got a super chat, by the way, from R. Cathelza.
Yes.
He's asking us Draymond Green and Fred VanVleet or Monty Morris and James Harden.
We didn't really talk much about Monty Morris at all.
Because I don't like him that much. So Fred VanVleet and Draymond Green.
If I change that to Barton and Harden, does that change your opinion?
No.
Okay. It's more just about staying away from everybody on Denver except for Jokic. Is there anybody else that you're getting too much on Denver? Because when we talked a lot about builds today, it was really just, I mean, Jokic clearly is going to dominate. But even with the Sixers, a couple of other guys came up. So I don't know. Barton came up very short in the top of the program. But I just didn't know how much you were really building with anybody outside of Jokic, FanDuel or DK.
Yeah, so I mean, Jokic is one of my most exposed players. As for Barton and Morris, I'm underweight to both of them. I have them in right around 10% of lineups on FanDuel and DK, where both of them are projected for ownership in the team. So it's not egregious or anything, but I'm undercutting the field on them. It's not priority plays. I assume when the lineups get run in Fantasy Cruncher, these are just guys like, oh, this is the amount of salary that's left. We played this guy, but they're not guys that I really like getting to. And I think there's better plays at the price points for each of them on both sites.
By the way, if you really wanted to go crazy here, we have on Odd Shopper, I think it's minus 2,500 for Brandon Clark to go under a half three. Just trying to see what the plus would be on that.
Well, Brandon Clark does not shoot all that often. No. It's not like
this would be sweating something out like completely unnecessarily. But I was just curious to see
what'd you say the under is?
The under is 2,500. The over is plus 850. It's not a great return on that. It may not even be worth it, to be honest, with what you're laying at 2,500.
I mean, if I had to take a side, it would be the under.
Right, but my point being is that, or
no, even at the odds. I mean,
with these odds, right?
He hasn't attempted a three since March 30th.
I'm telling you, man, this Mobley was like.
He made, let's see, how many threes did he make? I think he made 1 3 the entire season. Is that correct? No, never mind. He made, all right.
No, he had a couple, right?
He made 2 in December.
Yep.
He made 2. Oh, wow. He made 2 in one game in January. Those are the only 2 threes he made for the entire. So here, his month of January.
Yeah.
He went 2 of 5 from 3 for the entire month, made both those threes in the same game. That's crazy. So he's only attempted multiple threes in one game the entire year, and he hit both of them in that game.
And he's not hit a single three in any other game?
No, just for that month.
In the month. That's what I meant, the month, sorry.
Yeah. But he made no threes in October. He made no threes in November. He made 1 3 in December. He made 2 in January and none in March, 1 in April.
Oh my goodness. I just don't think 850 is enough, right? Like, shouldn't that be north of 1,200 or something along those lines at least?
If we're being, so how many threes did I find out he made this year? 5?
I think 5 total, right? And 80. Well, I don't know how many games.
3, 4, 5. So, all right. He made 5 threes all year. He also missed some time. So how many games did he play? He played in 64 games. All right. So let's see. So 5 divided by 64. What is the actual? I'm going to actually figure this out. So 5 divided by 64. He has an 8% chance to make a 3.
Okay.
And what would I consider?
Plus 850 is the current line.
I'm figuring out what the actual fair odds right now.
Yep.
Just based on, because I don't think the matchup is going to impact the odds of Brandon Clark hitting a 3 that significantly.
No, I don't think anything impacts Brandon Clark hitting a 3 outside of luck, right?
All right.
5 and 64 indicates that this is an anomaly.
So here's the fair line should be 12-1.
Yeah, plus 1,200. Okay.
Yep. That should be what the line is, 12-1.
Okay.
Anything worse than that's no good.
Yeah, it seemed off. And again, that's a trap for people thinking, oh, well, plus 850. Let me throw. I mean, that's an ATM fee. That's what you're doing there.
So also, this game so far, I don't know if you had it terrible.
Yeah.
We are 5 minutes in. The Jazz are up 8-6. There is nothing doing from a fantasy perspective in this game. If we look at the stats, because we love to sweat the first few minutes of the game, pretend that's what makes or breaks the entire slate. Donovan Mitchell, nothing, no stats, nothing at all. Conley is the high man right now for the Jazz with 4 points and a rebound. Over on the Dallas side of the game, Jalen Brunson has 4 points and 2 rebounds. This game is a total dud for DFS right now.
Unbelievable. Go Bears got 3 boards. That's about it. That's the only thing you can look at here. No, you're right.
Stinkeroo.
I was concerned about, we didn't really talk about it from like game flow stuff, just because we were getting right into it with Locke and some questions and all, man. But I didn't know if this past week was more of a precursor to what we would expect in the first round of the playoffs, things slowing down and just struggling to get to 100 points, or if it was more just chalking it up to, really even the Nets to a lesser extent, but just kind of bad teams struggling to make the playoffs in that final chalk, because this seems like it's more of the former, where God forbid that we see this in the first round, where it's, more slowing down and more lower scoring games than not.
By the way, somebody in chat, Carlos Manzo, was saying that he thought that Bullock had 3 points, but it got taken away. I thought he meant an actual 3. But no, it's just a steal that got stat corrected. I was confused what he had.
Okay.
I was confused what he
had. Don't do that,
but
because I've got a Bullock 3 prop going here. So don't do that to me. All right.
Well, it's not gonna make a difference, whatever the if it makes the shot or doesn't make the shot.
Yeah, if they took a 3 away from him, right?
No. 3 fantasy points.
Oh, I apologize. I stand corrected. That's what it was.
So no, it was just a steal that got stat corrected.
Got it. Okay. See, I didn't even know either. So that's good to know. You mentioned Bones earlier, Tommy G 2K3, but it was I think it was either Bones or Thibault was the question, something like that. But I didn't know how much you were getting to Bones in general. Probably not a ton, since you didn't really mention.
I don't think I have. Out of 150 lineups on FanDuel, 0% of them have Bones Highland.
That's it. That is.
So here's the issue too, though. Like, Bones Highland is the same price as guys like Scotty Barnes and Dylan Brooks. He just doesn't play nearly as big of a role as them. It's hard to get to him.
Yeah, that makes sense when you start to compare the pricing and the salaries across the board. So no play on Brandon Clark, right? You're not going to lay $2,500 to win $100.
No, because here's something else we could do. Let's figure out what the fair odds are on the other side.
To go under?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's what the odds should be on the other side. So we have
Awesemo's got a
yeah.
94%.
So what it should, on the other side, it should be like, it should, because the same thing. If one side should be plus 1,200, the other side should be minus 1,200. So minus 2,500 is very inflated.
Yes, absolutely. This is a terrible bet across the board.
It
took you 3 minutes to figure that out. Great.
And if we're being realistic, most bets are not good bets. Most of them, the vig is set in a way to where neither side is value to bet. Every once in a while, of course, there are value bets, but even think if you bet, let's say you go crazy on a slate Eytan, you bet 8 over 3s, right? For a full NBA slate. That means that the other, how many players play on a given day? That means there was 100 bets that you thought were no good.
Yep. That's true.
The majority of bets are not going to be good. Majority don't have value.
Yeah. My problem is not the extreme. My problem is getting down to that level of discernment where it's like, okay, I don't like that one. I do like that one. And it's kind of straddling the line. And then of course it's the one that I don't like that hits. The one that I do like, I give out and it busts in like the first quarter. But that's where it's getting trickier, as you would imagine, right? As you get into it and start to look at it a little thinner. But yeah, it does make sense, right? That you start to just get away the easy ones. Like, all right, you just strike off the easy ones and then you kind of build your little parameters there on one side. And then it kind of, ideally, it should make it a little bit easier to identify some value, but it's never perfect by any means. But you're right. There's a lot of discernment that people are probably applying that they don't even know.
Yeah, and also that's why it's easy to use something like OddsShopper, not to just make it seem like I'm incessantly plugging our stuff here, but there's no way to know what every line is on every sports book. Like I'm not sitting here with a pen and paper writing everything down and comparing it. It's just easy to have one place you go to where it's like, oh, look, Klay Thompson here, site has him at plus 195 to have a block. And then I could cross-reference that with my projections and come to a conclusion. It's not something that I would just, I wouldn't take it. It would take hours to look at every single sports book and every single line on all of them and compare everything.
All right. Speaking of Klay, I'm curious, and we can have some fun here in the final couple of minutes. And again, if you haven't already, we're chilling here, 90 minutes. We don't ask much. Just hit the thumbs up button, please. By the way, any interest in buying my Cade Cunningham Rookie of the Year plus 1,000 ticket?
No. Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you that that's already the voting is basically finished.
Yes.
Well, the vote as far as Cade goes. So the awards, if we could close by talking about some of the futures right now. Yep. Do you keep up with where the voting is at?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so voting right now, because I think some votes have come in since we started doing this. MVP is over at this point. Jokic is enough votes that he's actually fairly close to clinching it at this point.
Yep.
But so MVP, Jokic. Defensive Player of the Year is Smart. That one's wrapped up.
That was a huge call, by the way, because nobody could factor in the Draymond Green injury, but I think he was a pretty good number at the start of the year, right?
Yeah, like 80-1 or something like that, maybe. Not somebody that I bet at all. Actually, one thing that's kind of annoying is I had bets on Robert Williams to win Defensive Player of the Year. And considering Smart won, I think Robert Williams would have won had he not gotten hurt. There's no way to know that for sure.
No,
there's no way to know for sure.
There's something to that. I'll agree. There's something to that.
So because the Celtics had the best defense in the league by a mile in the second half of the season. Like the Celtics are beating the crap out of everybody. They might even be the best team in the Eastern Conference right now. I hope they are. I've bets on them to win the East, but
you and me both.
Yeah. So the Celtics defense was so good. I think there was such a strong narrative towards Boston, but it was hard to know where those votes were going to go. So Robert Williams, I believe at one point was like 5-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year, and Marcus Smart was 16-1. But then is what happened. Robert Williams got hurt and the odds flipped, and then the Celtics kept winning, and they tried down the stretch of the season when a lot of other teams didn't. So the narrative just kind of went to Marcus Smart. So he's got a massive amount of the votes right now that are known. He has, for reference in terms of points, because you get a certain amount of points for first place votes, second place votes, third place votes. We have about half the amount of votes that are in so far, and Marcus Smart is 103 points that are accounted for in the voting process. Rudy Gobert is second at 50-1 at 51. So there's a big gap. That's his award. Most improved player, Morant has a pretty significant lead. There's an outside chance that Garland, Poole, or Murray could catch him, but it's fairly unlikely. Rookie of the year is the one that's very close. We the same exact amount of votes right now for Barnes and Mobley. Cade is not going to factor into it, but that's the one that's a total toss-up. I have no clue who's going to win. Every other award race is basically finished.
Right before Mobley came back, Barnes was still like 530 or something like that. Like Barnes still had really good value kind of before it started that final stretch. Now, Cunningham was the long shot because you hope that Mobley being out would improve Cunningham's status. It did not work. I get it. It was a small play anyway. But yeah, I mean, Barnes, this was not my point being, Greg, is that this was not a 2-horse race for the final, 2 months of the season. I feel like Barnes, right?
Mobley had the award won until he got hurt. Because a couple of things happened. Number one, he missed games, but then number two, then the narrative starts to factor in because then the Cavs fell to the play-in game. Toronto passed them in the standings. So that's something a lot of voters kind of use as a barometer. But if Mobley doesn't get hurt and the Cavs end up holding on to their playoff spot, then yeah, he wins easily, but that just wasn't the case. And now it's really close. I will close with this because we just got a super chat that came in.
Thanks, Steve.
From Steve Case. Thumbs up on the vid and appreciate you guys. Thank you, Steve. Quick question. Using the boom bust tool, what's the drawback of building a few lineups with all top rated players? I ask because I've done so without much luck in the playoffs so far. Well, the playoffs just started today, so you can't have tried it that much. Games. But I assume, so it probably means for the play-in games. So the drawback is that if you're just doing with the most positively leveraged, I assume he means the top positive leverage players, or
maybe just top.
So if it's just top rated, so the issue is if you're just looking at the top rated players and not looking at ownership, you might just only be playing the most chalky plays on the slate. So that's what I would say is the drawback. If the top rated players are all of the most owned players on the slate, then you're probably building the same lineup as a lot of other people.
What if it was, though, the top leverage? Because you were starting to go down that real quick. Yeah. I just wanted you to get that
if it's the top leverage players, it's not going to be taking price into account for. So, then you're getting to a spot where it's like, oh, look, I've got all these great leverage plays that are 3,400. And it's like, well, you have to spend your salary somewhere.
Look at that. All right. We'll even stay late. We stay late. All right. People want to hang out after class. Greg will answer some questions. We'll throw out some bets and do whatever the hell we can. Thanks to Tyler. I think we might have put him to sleep, but great stuff as always. Thanks to you out there, really. More importantly, with a thumbs up, subscribing here to what we're doing. Take advantage. Those links below from the USFL to Underdog and beyond. Make sure you're following on Twitter at Ehrenberg DFS, at Shander Show. You can tweet Greg and say thank you for the win. But if you start to throw multiple compliments, he might mute you. He won't block you, but he might mute you, right?
You could also argue with me on Twitter, and I'm pretty receptive.
Well, you like that.
Yeah.
You're like Joe Davola and Seinfeld. You encourage intruders.
Oh, same like Kevin. I love Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant has, and by the way, talk about an insane person. And sorry, Tyler, I'll let you go in a second. But Kevin Durant, because I also brought this up last night. Kevin Durant has millions of followers on Twitter, millions of dollars, probably like $100 million at this point in his over the course of his career, maybe even more than that. I'd have to add up all his contracts. He might be worth $500 million. Sure. He's making burner accounts to argue with guys that have 5 followers on Twitter. I love that.
Yeah,
him and I are the same. I
mean, level of pettiness.
Yeah, not the same, but I understand the mentality.
Yeah, you exactly right. No, I kid you not. I could see you going to somebody's place and heckling, to a work. I could see you at that level of pettiness.
That's more or less what I do to Eric every day. I show up at his place of work and heckle him for a couple hours.
Yeah, and you get paid for it too. It ain't bad. All right, everybody. Thanks again for hanging with us. You're all set to go. I did see that, by the way. DFS with a couple of threes. And Bullock knocking down one as well. So
there you go.
We're on our way. We're on our way. Again, thanks to everybody for hanging with us. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the holiday weekend. Thanks to Greg, to Tyler. You thumbs up, subscribe. We'll see you soon.